So we're absolutely delighted to have you here, and hopefully Rachel will forgive us for that act of omission. Chitra, I wanted to just start by thanking you for standing by us and being here today. It means a lot. You have been pretty much part of the Jaipur literature family, you and Murthy, for so many years, and we appreciate the way that you continue to spread wisdom, not just through your books, but through your very considered conversations. We do acknowledge that today many of the writers appearing here have been spoken with and asked to boycott, as have audiences. And it's really in that context that I would like to, on behalf of all our colleagues and all the few people who've come here today, to thank you for being here and continuing to speak.
You're very welcome, Sanjoy. I think over the years, the JLF family has indeed become just like my own family. And even more than that, I really believe in what you do, which is to have free, open discourse, bringing together people of many backgrounds and many persuasions. I believe that discussion is a very healthy way to deal with things that we don't agree with, and perhaps even ways of changing people's minds. So it's just something I try to do in my classroom, and it's just something I believe in trying to do in the world. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Chitra, and thank you, Rachel. I know that the venues too have been pressurized and there's been some security concerns. So thank you so much for basically standing for the possibility of free speech. And now coming to this fabulous book, and for those of you who haven't read it, I picked it up on the flight. I read it on the flight out to America early last week. And it was absolutely fascinating to read this story about the last queen of the Punjab. And I'm going to start by asking you, Chitra, what inspired the story? Because there's a whole story behind the story.
And before I start on that, I just wanted to say a big hello to Rachel and a thank you. I think the first time I read it, Asia Society, was for my very first book, Arranged Marriage. And, I've been an admirer of you and this place ever since. So thank you for your support of my work, but also of JLF and so many writers. Very appreciated. So this story behind The Last Queen, it really is a story, because I was halfway through a novel when I felt, writing another novel, when I felt that I had to stop that and start working on The Last Queen. And that happened quite by chance, because I was in Kolkata with a previous novel, Before We Visit the Goddess, about 3 generations of women living in India, living here in the US. And as I walked into the auditorium a little early, the person who was presenting before me, William Dalrymple, with his book Kohinoor, had just put up on the screen a painting. And it was a painting of Maharani Jindan. But I didn't know that because I had not known anything about her. I am sorry to say, although I knew about her husband, Maharaja Ranjit Singh, I knew about her son, Maharaja Dalip Singh, who would be the last king of Punjab. I did not know about her. And that kind of points to how often history just pushes the women to the corners, because she was very important in the lives of both these men. But when I saw that picture, which was the last painting that is available of Maharani Jindan, which was commissioned by her son, Maharaja Dalip Singh, just a little bit before her death, I was just struck. I was struck by the character that appeared through that painting, that lived, that came alive. Just the look on her face, I said, this is a woman who has lived an amazing life, and I'm going to find out more about it. And then I started doing some research. And the reason that William Dalrymple had put up that painting was because for a while the Kohinoor had been with her, and of course then Maharaja Dalip Singh had the Kohinoor, which then was taken away to England, as was he, a young boy, taken away to Queen Victoria's court and separated from his mother for many, many years. As I researched her story, I discovered that not only was she beautiful, not only was she an amazingly charismatic person, after all, she was the daughter of the dog trainer in the palace, in the Lahore Killa. But Maharaja Ranjit Singh was so taken, not just with her beauty, but with her character, with her personality, that he made her into his wife. Not only did he marry her, but he promised her, he told her at that time, you will be my last wife, you will be my last queen. I do not want any other queens after you. And for Maharaja Ranjit Singh to say that, that was quite something, because he had a zanana filled with wives. You know, he liked wives, he liked women.
Yesterday we spoke much about the beginnings of the story, but I'm going to go right to the very end. And if you could tell us what happens when Maharani Jinda goes to London with Dalip Singh. Dalip Singh is able to persuade the Empress to allow the Rani to come to London. Tell us a little bit about what happens when she comes here, and how she felt sort of displaced in so many ways and perhaps uncomfortable.
So I have to give a little background for us to understand the power of that moment, which is that Maharani Jinda battled the British very bravely and as much as she could and as long as she could, until she was betrayed by her own generals during the Anglo-Sikh War. But even after that, she continued battling them in every which way that she knew. She would embarrass them on state occasions, etc., until they were like, you know, she's just a bad influence. And she would tell her son, Dalip, who was nominally still on the throne, she would say, don't listen to them. Don't do what they're telling you to do. Don't put a tika on the forehead of that general. He was a traitor to our cause. So they were like, she is a thorn in our flesh. She has to be removed. So there's a very tragic scene about how they remove her. And her son doesn't know what happens to her. She didn't know she was going to be removed from her son. Lies are told to him. Your mother has gone mad. She's been put in a madhouse. But she never lost her courage. She never lost her spirit. She fought even when she was ill and she was imprisoned under terrible conditions in a high security prison, Chunar Fort. She escaped. She went into exile in Nepal, and finally
they meet in Calcutta.
They meet in Calcutta through many trickeries that Dalip Singh has to employ. But they are so popular when they meet in Kolkata and the story spreads that he's immediately recalled to England. He had come on the guise of a tiger hunt, right? He had pretended that I'm coming to India for a tiger hunt. But now mother and son have united. They've become a force. He's recalled to England. And he says, I will not go without my mother. And what can they do? There's a lot of public hue and cry, so they agree. And the thing with Maharani Jinda is she never wanted to go there, obviously. And she never wanted to leave the land where, you know, the land of her forefathers, the land where her beloved husband, his ashes are. She did not want to go, but this was the only way she could be with her son, so she agreed. But she continued resistance after she went. She was, So, you know, she would do things like Lord and Lady Logan, who became the guardians of Dalip Singh after he was taken away from her. So Lord and Lady Logan would come over for dinner because, you know, by this time Dalip Singh was largely culturally conditioned and brainwashed.
Colonized.
Yes, colonized. And he loved Lord and Lady Logan. He didn't see, them as the usurpers. But she would say, so Lord and Lady Logan come, this is really funny, it's in the book, and they're eating, and she says to Lord Logan, I wanted to poison you when you were in India. I guess it's a good thing I didn't yet. And so they're eating, they stop eating. And this is a real story because Lady Logan was a very avid journal writer, and she's put all of this in her journals, which was wonderful for me as a researcher writing this book. Yeah.
Did you want to read that bit where they take Dilip away?
I thought I would read the part where they're reunited. How about that? So the way they take Dilip away from her is, she's very careful at that point. He's just a little boy. She never leaves him alone. But then they say, the British say, a flock of parrots has come to this garden, and we would like to take you to see the parrots. And he's like, Mom, I really want to go see the parrots. And she doesn't want to say no. And she says, go, but don't stay too long in the sun. Just come back quickly. And that's the last he sees of her, because she's immediately, forcibly taken, put into a covered carriage and transported to the first of many prisons, each one farther and farther away from Punjab, because she continued to be such a loved character. But I'm going to read about when they are finally reunited, and this is in Spence's Hotel in Kolkata. Let me just find it. So she's waiting in Spence's Hotel. She hasn't seen him for years and years, and she doesn't know how this reunion is going to be. I don't know how long I'll have to wait before Dilip arrives in Calcutta. The resident gave me very little information. So I'm surprised and delighted when, in just a few hours, I receive a message stating that my son would like to meet with me if it is convenient. I want to laugh and cry at the same time. Convenient? After our long separation, I'd walk through fire to see Dilip. I'm nervous too. It has been so long. I remember our last moments together, my sweet, plump-cheeked boy waving an excited goodbye from his carriage window on his way to an excursion at Shalimar. I'd waved back, telling him I would see him in the evening. My last words had been, remember, too much sun gives you a headache. Neither of us knew we would be separated for 14 years. My mind churns with questions. What does he think about? What does he look like now? What does he care for? How have his years with the Logans and the British Queen changed him? What, if anything, does he remember about me? Then he's at the door, a vague shape in dark firang clothes. And by now she's largely blind, so, a vague shape is really what she sees. If my maid, Mahi, hadn't alerted me, I wouldn't have known him. That's how weak my eyes have become, or perhaps how much he's changed. Biji? His voice is deep, a grown man's. His Punjabi is strangely accented and halting, as though he hasn't spoken it in a long time. Is that you? Ah, my beautiful Biji, what have they done to you? The shock in his face makes me realize how much I've changed, how old and ugly I've become. I'm nothing like the fiery young queen he must have held in his mind's eye all these years. I shrink back, but the next moment he's kneeling in front of my armchair, kissing my hands, telling me how much he has missed me, how he feared he'd never seen me again. and how he wondered during all those lonely nights in Fatehgarh and London if I thought about him as much as he thought about me. I run my fingers hungrily over his face, his shoulders, his arms, trying to comprehend that it's really my Dalip, so tall and handsome. Joy chokes my throat, but I manage to say, "You're alive and safe by Vaheguru's grace, and we're finally together. What more could I want?" Then my hands touch his head, and instead of the pagri that every Sikh man wears, I feel his short hair. I knew that Dalip had become a Christian, but having the physical proof at my fingertips shocks me so deeply that I cannot hold back my tears. "The British took everything from you, beta," I say, "your throne, your kingdom, the Kohinoor. I know you were too young to stop them, but your religion, how could you let them take that too?"
You talked about her being a fairy queen, and yet in many ways she wasn't born into royalty. You talked about her being born into a doctriner's house in the palace in the fort of Lahore. Give us a setting of where she came from, because she lived in a village. She lived with her mother and her brother in great penury and poverty. Tell us the story of how she became this fairy queen from just being a simple girl in a village.
Yeah, it's quite a story because, her father was the dog trainer in the Killa, but he pretty much lived in Lahore, and, he had some habits. For those who were here for the last session, I think he would have found himself in that kind of shop also, where not tea but other things were being sold.
And he gambled a lot.
So the family never got to see much of his salary, and they had to fend for themselves. And her brother Jauhar, just a little older than her, that he kind of had to take over, and they would have to go into the fields and steal fruit and produce just to eat. So it was a tough life. And then after she comes to Lahore, her father sees her as this way of getting out of poverty. So he's trying to find like an older husband for her so he can get some money from that marriage transaction. So she was in a very difficult situation, but she just comes to the Maharaja's notice, and because of a horse. I don't want to give away everything, so you'll have to find out how the horse, which is a very famous historical horse actually, Laila, how she, what is the role that Laila plays in?
Well, how she feeds the horse a piece of jaggery and therefore captures the horse's interest, and therefore
yes, the horse just loves her. And the Maharaja is very startled because the horse does not like most people and tends to bite them, in fact, if they come too close. So
But without giving away too much of that part of the story, but she takes, the Maharaja takes great interest in her, and then at some point of time she proposes, as opposed to he proposes.
Yes. So she is very intelligent, and he feels right from the beginning that he can discuss all kinds of matters with her, and she understands, like state matters. This is before they're married. And he can tell her about his vision of uniting Punjab, which is what he did. Before him, there was no kingdom of Punjab. And I think it's that gets him interested in her. But he thinks she's too young, so he's not taking any steps, and her father is trying to get her married off to this older man. So she actually comes up and she says, well, I want to be in your life, in whatever way you want. I don't care. And then, but he respects her so much. He says, I will not make you into a concubine. You will be my wife. And then he says, my last.
He asks her to go back to the village for 2 years till she's 18, and then they marry. But one of the things that really catches the Maharaja's interest, and that makes for a wonderful, her later story, was that she speaks of truth. She speaks the truth to him. She's not a fawning courtier seeking his every approval.
Right, right. And that is something she decides early on in my novel. Now, in writing this historical novel, I researched as much as I could, everything I could find about her character, but obviously her thoughts are not known to us. But based on her later actions, I went back and created the thoughts that I felt she would be having. And she decides early on that she's not going to lie to the king. Everyone around him wants his approval. They're willing to lie all the time. And she feels that I want an honest relationship with them. And I think he really appreciates that. Like when he will tell her something that he did, she will tell him what she thinks. When she thinks he's done the wrong thing, she will tell him. And to his great credit, he listened to her.
You know, you talked about the fact that women are always relegated in history, not Queen Elizabeth II, who's right now, we're seeing so many images of her, but certainly then. And how did you sort of come upon the amount of information that you've gleaned here about her, the different prisons that she was sent to, or the different forts that she was imprisoned in, the way that she sent messages across the kingdom, the great betrayal that followed? Where does all of this sit? Was it at the British Museum or the British Library? I mean, where did you find all of this incredible information about her?
Well, Sanjoy, as you know, that the research for this became particularly difficult because as soon as I had kind of started the research and was getting ready to think about where to go, like travel to places, COVID struck. So then I couldn't go anywhere. But I was able to, I had collected before then a whole lot of books about the Sikh Empire, books about the fall of the Sikh Empire, the rise of the Sikh Empire, many books on Maharaja Ranjit Singh, many books on Maharaja Dalip Singh, one little booklet on Maharani Jindan, which made me even more determined to write this book. It was like she was written out of history, and I was like, that is just not right. But that is what does happen to many women, has happened to many women. They have been pushed to the corners, and my whole purpose was to bring her center stage. So books were there, and because I couldn't go physically to places, I relied a lot on old paintings and old photographs. Old photographs were very helpful to me. Photographs of places like just Lahore, the streets of Lahore, the marketplaces of Lahore, the little houses, all of that. And of course, Lahore Killa, there are many, many photographs. And I even got a map of Lahore Killa, which was very helpful in figuring out where is the Zanana, where is the Shish Mahal, where afterwards, as a queen, she moved in there and she lived there. And then Maharaja Ranjit Singh built her a Haveli. It's called Mai Jinda Haveli. Where is that? So all those maps, photographs, paintings, and other books. Sometimes I'd have to read a whole book and there would be one paragraph about her. But even that was important. So actually, Khushwant Singh was a very good source for me. I found a lot of things buried here and there, but they were there.
For many of you who may have engaged with Chitra's work, she writes in this vivid 70 sort of superscape, filmscape. And the minute I finished, I put down the work and I said to you, this is a perfect film. Primarily because the characters are so fleshed out and so live, and so they go through not as ideal people, they go through with their flaws and their problems and their trials and tribulations. And you see that in all your work, whether it's with Draupadi, whether it's with Sita, in the telling of the stories, you look at it very differently. Did that sort of come to you instinctively? Is this the telling of the story from the female gaze, or from the woman's gaze? Is that something that you set out to do? Is it something that came to you?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think just even as a reader or a student of literature, I had become aware quite a while back that women did tend to get pushed aside, or their story was told by other voices, often by male voices, or seen through the male gaze. So it is something that's really important to me. It is a project for me to bring women center stage and for us to hear their voices and also for us to see them as complex and sometimes flawed characters. Even women who are wonderful, they are human. And why should they be whitewashed? What is the need for that? It's very important for us to accept them just as they are. And therefore, Maharani Jinda, she has many wonderful qualities, but she's hot-tempered. She will not listen to advisors, and she sometimes lets emotions rule her, as with her brother Jauhar. Well, when she becomes king, he really wants to come to court and be a courtier. And she knows it's a bad idea because by now Jauhar has developed many bad habits, and but she can't say no to him. She just loves him too much.
You know, you said that she, while the Maharaja was alive, Sarkar was alive as the court addressed him, she learned many stories. She learned statecraft from him. And yet she made this one mistake, and you've been very kind to her in the book. In many ways, she lost the Punjab, for lack of a better word. She lost the Punjab, she lost the Kohinoor. It was the last sort of bastion against colonial rule. And, but tell us that one lesson that the Maharaja followed during his reign that she wasn't able to heed.
Yes, and one of the great things that the Maharaja did, Maharaja Ranjit Singh, which was very unlike just about every kingdom at that time in India, is that he never brought into his court people just because they were relatives. There was no nepotism in his court. Only people who were qualified. And once he decided they were qualified, it didn't matter what background they came from, whether they were Hindu or Sikh or Muslim or European, whether they were Christians. He would embrace them, bring them in, and make sure that they prospered. But he never allowed the relatives of his wives to come to court. So, Jauhar had been wanting to come to court, but even though he loved Jinda so much, Maharaja Ranjit Singh said no. But she couldn't do it. Now, yes, Jauhar will do things that are foolish, and Jauhar will do things that will weaken her position. But let us not forget that the reason the Anglo-Sikh War is lost is because of the treachery of the generals who went over to the British side. That is the real reason.
And she lost their support to a large extent because of her support to Jauhar, her brother, and not heeding the advice sometimes of her court.
That is true. She did. But in some ways, one of the main people who went over to the British is a man who was in love with her, with whom she had a relationship. And he had told her, and this part is in other books, and he had wanted her to just leave because she would not have been allowed to marry her and remain Queen Regent. And she said, I'm not giving up my son for you. If I'm not Queen Regent, they'll just tear him apart. So he knew that there was no future. And then when the British approached him, I think he was angry and upset, and he went over. So that's Raja Lal Singh. He goes over to the British side along with his general.
What again is very interesting in the book is the way that you look at women. The Zanana, for example, was this hub of politics, the hub of power. Tell us how they received Jinda when she first came in, and the sort of power politics that you read about it in Akbar's court, for example, where the women were really the power behind the throne in many ways. And similarly here, the Zanana was a particular kind of place, not just confined to the Parda, but, politics. It was a hub of activity.
Yes, and the woman who ruled the Zanana, Mai Nakain, Maharaja Ranjit Singh's main queen, right? She was the principal queen. Her son was the oldest. Well, he wasn't necessarily the oldest one, but he was the one who had been chosen to be the successor, Karak Singh. And she was very upset when this upstart, this dog trainer's daughter, became a queen. And she did a lot of things, including try some plots on her life, on Jinda's life, until Maharaja Ranjit Singh learned about it and put an end to it. But yes, it was a place rife with politics. And it was a lot of fun writing that, because only like sentences here and there were available in the research, but I imagined all of these women and how they would have been feeling, and how things would have been when Maharani Jinda actually arrives. And she arrives under very difficult circumstances, because Maharaja Ranjit Singh was supposed to go to her village, marry her, and bring her back in state. But he couldn't, because at this point, he's at the border.
At Firozpur.
Yeah, he's at Firozpur because, the British are planning shenanigans. They're trying to take over Firozpur. He has to stop them without starting a battle, because, he was very smart. He didn't want face-to-face conflict with the British. So she comes all by herself. It's nighttime. She's been married to his sword in, the marriage ceremony, so she carries that. But there's no reception. There's nobody there. Nobody even seems to know that she's coming. But when she finally manages to get into the Qilla, she's shown into this little room, dirty, filled with like mouse droppings, and there's just a plate of food left open over there, and the maid who shows her and says, "Yeah, that's for you." But then when she gives the maid some bakshish, the maid says, "Well, maybe you shouldn't eat that food."
And the maid Mangla was actually given to her because of a request. Tell us a little bit about how that transpired, and why did she need somebody to back her?
Right. So, then finally Maharaja Ranjit Singh comes and he's like, "I'm so sorry. I know you had a hard time." And they have a beautiful reunion, very romantic. And then he says, "I would love to give you a special wedding present in addition to many other things that he gave her." And he says, "What would you like? You want you want the Kohinoor?" He's ready to give her the Kohinoor. She's like, "No, I don't want that Kohinoor." And she says, "No, I don't want all of those things. I like simplicity, but I do want something," which maybe some of you will relate to. I certainly did. She said, "I want good household help." So he says, "I know just the person for you," and he gets her Mangla, and they just click. Mangla is she's beyond loyal to her. She is very loyal to her till the British forcibly separate them and send Maharani Jinda to prison.
While the Maharaja is alive, and he really strides through the length and breadth of his country, his state, like a lion. And you write about him showing much of his characters. I mean, what was it that was so appealing about him that he was able to command the kind of respect that he did from all kinds of people, and he was able to conquer so many lands and command these people who were a fairly rebellious lot? Because when he dies, the Sikh armies themselves then take over and they kill, one of the people on the throne at that point of time.
Yeah. You brought up some important things, and I'd love to also speak about the army's relationship with Maharani Jinda. She's so smart with that. But Maharaja Ranjit Singh, I think there were two things. There were so many things that were amazing about him. He had his faults. He would drink to excess. He loved to party. In fact, that's what ruins his health.
He has 2 strokes. You talk about the 2 strokes.
He has strokes. So all of that is going on, but he is fearless. Okay? He was truly, totally fearless. And he would he discussed this with Jinda. He said, "I would face an army and all fear would drop away from me. I could have a little small contingent of people and we're facing a big army. I didn't care. He just did not care about death." And I think that really inspired his soldiers, so that when he went into battle, they were like, "We'll follow you anywhere."
And they did the same thing with Jinda. Jinda took the leap saying out when she knew there was going to be a rebellion. And
yes. And she remembered how Maharaja Ranjit Singh then developed a very loving relationship with his army. They really would have followed him to death without question. And she realized that in this divided court, she's now just become Queen Regent. Dalip Singh is little, and there are all these powerful courtiers, and pretty much all of them are against her, or they want her to agree with them. And she's like, where can I get someone who will really love and care for my son? And she thinks, I will go to the Khalsa army. She goes to the Khalsa army, and she does something very unusual in the court at that time. She removes her veil and she says, I'm depending on you to take care of this little boy who is the son of the Sarkar that you loved. And they are so taken by what she does, and they are so touched by it, they give her the title Mother of the Khalsa, and they are just totally loyal to her. But to be able to do that...
Did you want to contextualize the taking up of the veil? I don't think that...
Right, because at that time, in the court, the women stayed in the zanana and they were veiled. If they came out, it was always with the veil. And she removes her veil, so that's like saying...
Looks them in the eye. It's like literally tiger.
Looks them in the eye, but she's also saying, you are family. I'm doing what I would only do with family. Right? And then she goes back to court and she says, no more veil for me. I'm just going to sit here and, you'll have to look me in the eye when you're telling me this should be done to the kingdom or that should be done to the kingdom. I mean, what a woman. What a woman.
What a woman. One of the things that, again, you sort of talk about, or you hint to it, is that Maharaja Ranjit Singh, especially after his stroke number 1 and later stroke number 2, wasn't the greatest lover. And you talk about it in the book. But they produce a child.
They do.
Was it his child?
Yes, definitely it was. Yes. From everything we see, it is his child. And Maharaja Ranjit Singh is no fool. He acknowledges the child and he gives him his title and he gives him his name and he has a great celebration. So, love overcomes all.
We're going to open it up for questions. Like I said, it's a totally amazing book, which I hope many of you will pick up and read. And many of her books, all her books, in fact, are quite amazing.
And I wanted to just share the exciting news with the audience that it has been optioned now for a film. So, fingers crossed, fingers crossed.
And hopefully they won't make it into a singing, dancing film, but they'll make it into a really strong biopic. But any questions? Otherwise, I'll go back and ask a last question. One second, Tina. You'll have to come down to the mic. Yeah, we've got a lot of people watching online, and thank you all for watching. That's okay. Just come, do it. Come on. And if anybody else needs to ask a question, you do need to come down to the mic here.
Well, let's hope so that I continue to ask it because I'm a shy, retiring person who's now intimidated by all this.
Says she's speaking all the way down.
Well, Sanjoy knows me for many decades and he knows how shy and retiring I am. Well, my question, of course, is...
to the mic, please, because it's going live. Yeah.
But it's making this...
It's fine.
It's making this pitchy sound and not my beautiful voice. All right. So I'm intrigued by the fact that we can pass judgment on a man who's, legendary, etc., that he was a poor lover. And I want to know what historical facts there are that point to this. Before we malign the guy, And how are we so confident that Dilip was actually his biological son?
Right.
All right, now I'm embarrassed.
Okay, yes. All right, so, I think the fact... Now, Maharaja Ranjit Singh, he's no fool, and he doesn't do things that he doesn't completely believe in for himself. He didn't care what other people thought. There were other children that his wives had. He never acknowledged them, which caused, much problems later on.
Much consternation.
Much consternation and
intrigues
battles.
And deaths and murder.
Intrigues and deaths, exactly. But this child, right away, he did. And the fact that he wasn't always a great lover didn't mean that he wasn't at any time a great lover. So he felt, this is it. And Maharani Jinda was completely very careful. She made sure there was not even a trace of doubt, anything linking her to any men. She had a lot of admirers at court. She was very beautiful. She very carefully kept herself in Mai Jinda Haveli, didn't go anywhere else.
And also, just to sort of add to that, remember these courts had spies all over.
Oh,
and the
yes.
Zanana had.
And Mai Nakain would have loved to have proved that this was not the son of the Sarkar. But Jinda was very careful. Mai Nakain couldn't prove anything. No one ever could prove anything. So I think by omission, it is clear that that was his son, but also by his own behavior and by the kind of person that Mai Jinda was.
But having said that, after the Sarkar died, she did take a toy boy.
Did you make it, you're conflating like years of history. This is much, much later, many years later, she falls in love with Maharaja Lal Singh. And for a long time, she doesn't do anything about it, but finally, yes. And she says this, she says, like all around me, all these nobles have always taken many lovers, many wives. Maharaja Ranjit Singh himself did. And I've been a widow since my early 20s. Is it not natural? Is it not normal that I should feel desire? Why should I not be able to express desire just because I'm a woman? And I think that is a valid question that we need to ask. Why is it that the woman needs to behave differently always from the man?
It's a question that she's asked in some of her earlier books as well, certainly in her book on Draupadi as well as Sita. Chitra Banerjee, thank you so much for this absolutely brilliant conversation. As I said, sex, love, intrigue, murder, state, royalty, and the Kohinoor. What better way to create this story on The Last Queen?
And one more thing, which is how she will finally get her revenge on the British, her final act of defiance. After she is old, after she goes to England, when she's almost dying, she will get her final revenge. But I will not tell you what it is. I want you to read it in the book.